everyone! Quick note before the video actually starts. I am now in the future part of this video and went to edit it and realized that the lighting in the first part of this video, the intro part, is really awful. I am so sorry. It was right before I got new lighting for my whole space, and it is awful. So I'm sorry. Lighting has improved, as you can probably tell, and I just wanted to give you a heads up on that, and my apologies. Now, with that being said, on to the video! Hello, everyone! I got a new Oracle deck, and we're gonna look at it. I just got this Literary Witches Oracle deck, and I'm so excited to check it out. This is basically a deck made for me. I was a literature major, and a lot of my favorite women writers are in this deck, including my favorite poet. And I'm really excited to check this out. I'm a big huge literature nerd. I mean, lunar libraries, right? So we're gonna go check this out, and you know the drill. Flip through, look at the cards, initial look, initial thoughts, and then I'll work with it for a bit. And the last part will be just my thoughts after working for a little bit and seeing what I think of it. So let's go. The Literary Witches Oracle. I'm so excited to check this out. I am so intrigued by this. So let's get started. Of course, we've got a whole guidebook, which I'm really interested in looking at. And then we've got the cards. There's so many cards. There are 70 cards, which is a lot for an Oracle deck. Most of my Oracle decks are about 44 cards. I think there are a few that have a little more, but most of them are 44 cards. So 70 cards is a large amount compared to most Oracle decks. Of course, it's not as much as tarot, which means that it'll still be fine to shuffle this amount, but it is a lot more than most Oracle decks. So here we've got the back of the cards. I already love it. The deck is a little more gothic styled than I normally go for. A little darker than I normally go for, but it's Literary Witches. I can't not have it. So let's take a look at them. So of course, before we get started, let's look at the back. Discover divination using the magic of literary genius. Unearth wisdom of the witchiest women in literary history and let their brilliance illuminate your path. Drawn from the book Literary Witches, a celebration of magical women writers, which is a book I definitely want to pick up. The cards in this oracle deck bear portraits of powerful female authors and mystical spell ingredients, both full of symbolism meant to nourish the witch that lives within you. Yeah, so there's a lot of authors. I don't know how many authors, but then there's magical spell ingredients as well, which is why there are so many cards in this deck. But I think there's 50-ish authors included. We'll have to see. I'm not going to count them, actually. But let's take a look. So we've got Doll, a classic in spellwork and stuff. We've got Mary Shelley for Loss. Not a surprise. I love the art style. Like I said, it's not my typical art style. I usually go for bright and cheery, as you can probably tell from the decks that I have reviewed in previous videos. It's definitely a lot darker and more gothic, but I think it fits the tone of the deck. We've got a cute little snail. It's interesting that the snail, the ingredients don't say what they're for, but the authors do. So we've got Alejandra Pizarnik for Solitude. This isn't someone I'm familiar with, so I'm going to check them out for sure. They did say in the description that there's a lot of Western contemporary, like European English language writers, but there are also a lot from other cultures that people in the US might not be familiar with, which I'm really excited for. So we've got Sappho for love, of course, sapphic poetry. Chicken. I wonder what the chicken symbolizes. Peacock. Elixir. I like the little ghost. The little ghosty flowing up. Emily Dickinson, The Soul. Emily Dickinson has always been really interesting to me because she grew up in my home state. She actually grew up really near where I went to college, and it was something that was talked about often. And of course, she had a very interesting life, just like being that willing spinster, that solitary spinster. So I like her a lot. We've got a wall. Ooh, like boundaries and protection. Zora Neale Hurston for story. I love, there's a lot of disembodied hands in this artwork. And then of course we've got the 3 figures flying around her. That's interesting. And the potion just spilling out. That card already says quite a story. Leslie Marmon Silko for community. This is a name I recognize, but I haven't read anything. So I gotta look up what she's written. But of course I love that cat. It doesn't even it is a cat, but it looks kind of like a panther in stature. So I like that. And then of course I love the spider webs on the corners. Eel. Toni Morrison, Power. Of course, Toni Morrison is a classic, well known. I read a lot of her stuff in college, so I'm excited to see what they reference in the guidebook. And once again, we've got the potion spilling out. This actually looks like milk spilling out, but there's a figure in it, and there's the crows, and these flowers, some dandelions flying all around her, and so nice. A braid. Braids are used in magic, of course, not just hair braids, but like that whole binding symbolism, and also like the weaving, knot magic. So good. Volcano. Ooh. When I went to New Zealand about 1.5 years ago now, I got to walk on some completely dormant volcanoes, some not so dormant volcanoes. And actually, while I was there was a very deadly eruption of a volcano, but it wasn't where I was at the time. It was actually where we were going in a few days, but we weren't going to the volcano, but that area. So, it was the first time I'd been anywhere with volcanoes, and they're so interesting, but so dangerous, right? Virginia Woolf for Vision. Very, very familiar. Read a lot of her stuff in college. I love the flowers just coming out of that little bottle. Look at all those flowers. I love it. We've got an apple, which the apple is like symbolic of life. And of course, there's always, like, if you grew up Christian, there's the whole symbolism of getting kicked out of Eden because of the apple and everything. It is a symbol of life and nurturing. Joy Harjo for bravery. Again, we've got a lot of flowers. We've got someone falling from the sky, and we've got horses. Ooh, horses. And once again, I didn't note it in the other card that we saw it. I think it was Virginia Woolf's card. Yeah. Coming out of the darkness, and but this time the darkness has a ton of plants and flowers in it. So a little different connotation growing out of the darkness. Yeah, a lion, prideful and courageous. Wings that can always take you somewhere else. Gertrude Stein, perspective. Gertrude Stein is my favorite poet. I love her. And of course we've got the Rose, which she was the poet who is famous for a rose is a rose is a rose. But then there's Tender Buttons is a really famous one. And there are just so many others that I love. I actually, in college, I took a graduate course on modern poetry, and I wrote a 10-page paper on like 2 paragraphs of one of her poems. I just love it. And there's so much symbolism in her poetry, but also definitely perspective, because you have to look at things from different angles for her poetry. So this fits, and I'm really, really excited for it. I love it. We've got a glove. Ooh, this one's interesting. I can think of like protection, and just keeping your hands clean, kind of. But I'm interested to see what the book says about this. Emily Bronte, fantasy. Again, I think she grew up near where I grew up. And she was like one of those amazing, well-known authors. I love that she has this whole house in her hands. It kind of gives like a dollhouse feel, and playing into that fantasy. And also I just love the little creatures just climbing up those branches. I originally thought they were birds, but then I looked at them closer and they looked to be ants. So that's something you don't normally see, ants in oracle cards. We've got a teacup. Of course, there's always reading tea leaves, but then there's like the whole ceremony of tea, and just like an important elixir, and just like a really common thing that people historically have used in witchcraft. We've got a skull, which matches these cards' aesthetic perfectly. And of course, no question that this doesn't belong in this deck. It clearly does. There's a lot of death wrapped up in a lot of these literary works, a lot of heavy themes, and just, the morbidity of life. Yumiko Karahashi for transformation. Once again, we've got things spilling out. We've got, I think it's a seashell, and we've got an apple being eaten. So we've got a lot going on. That kind of looks like an egg that's spilling out. It could be, I don't know, a crystal ball maybe, but it looks like an egg. I'm intrigued by this card. I'm intrigued. Eileen Chang for fate. Yeah, we've got the disembodied hands crossing over. We've got, I think it kind of looks like rosary beads, kind of. And we've got a pipe. I like the moon in the window. Like, that window is just kind of there. It didn't need to be there, but it's kind of there. And I love it. There's so many details in these cards. Like, they look very basic, but there's so many details. Like, there's the bracelet. And here we've got more flowers. We've got them on the wallpaper now. We've got Shirley Jackson for family. She is most famous for The Lottery, which is kind of like the predecessor to The Hunger Games, right? When The Hunger Games came out, I was like, ooh, the beginning is kind of like The Lottery. I was a big fan of the show Sliders growing up. I used to watch it with my dad, and there was an episode that was based on the lottery. So I'm well familiar with that story. And I like that it's all family because they had to like sacrifice someone from their family. But we've got this kind of weird painting, smudge painting on the background with a house in it. And again, we got stuff pouring out. That's a common theme. Flowers and stuff spilling out. So I'm intrigued by that theme. But also we've got some needle and thread, which I have been working on a cross stitch project actually today, so that's nice to see. A white dress. White has so many different connotations. It's like purity, but it's also death. It's all these different things. So the symbolism in this card can be so many different things. And I'm curious to see what the book says about it. Wildflowers, again, more flowers, but wildflowers are just, they're so nice. I mean, they're part of nature. Nobody actually like grows them on purpose, right? Well, most people don't. They persevere despite that, and I love them for that. Angela Carta, Identity. Again, we've got the flowers and vines. We've got two legs just coming up, which is interesting. This actually reminds me of Toulouse-Lautrec, an art piece that he did. But then we've got a wolf or a dog howling, and we've got some drops of blood. Maybe not howling, maybe drinking the blood as it drips down. So again, we've got disembodied hands. Those look more like claws. So there's a lot going on in this card. Audre Lorde, Justice. Definitely a perfect card for her. She was all about speaking her truth and also just, standing up against racists and the system and everything. So if you haven't studied Audre Lorde in Western, especially American classes, then, well, that's the system, right? But you definitely should. It's an interesting figure that she's carrying in her hand. And again, she's coming up out of the darkness. Looks like coming out of water. Kind of looks like coming out of a swamp. And then we've got figure kind of just floating there. Another hand coming out, and I like the eyes. So, and she's just like defensive, or not even, maybe ready to attack, but also ready to protect. And I love it. We've got a cauldron, of course, classic, and another hand just like coming out, but looking kind of like smoke coming out too, or steam coming out. So something is cooking. Anna Akhmatova, who I'm not familiar with at all, but is Endurance. We've got like a peacock or possibly a phoenix. I don't know. I always wanted to be a phoenix, but we've got a bird up there, kind of shielding her. And we've got some figures down below that look like dolls. And I'm not familiar with this person, but they're really giving me Russian or Polish vibes. So I'm going to have to check her out. Agatha Christie, Trickery. I love it. Agatha Christie, known for writing a lot of mystery novels. So, of course, Trickery fits her a lot. Again, we've got floral motif. We've got the wallpaper, but then we've also got it on the on the cloth on the table. We've got a noose. We've got a knife with what looks like blood oozing out. I love it. I love it. We've also got an interesting clock that only has 10 hours on it. So, lots of stuff going on here. I love it. Mystery. Trickery. And then, after Agatha Christie, we've got a knife. But, of course, anathemas are used in practice a lot. So there's a lot of different types of knives that are used. Some, like, prick their fingers for a couple drops of blood for spells. And then there's cord cuttings and everything. There's a lot to do with knives in witchcraft. Mushrooms. Who doesn't love some good mushrooms? They're really common and abundant in forests. They just pop up, wherever. They're used in a lot of spells. And also, there's the psychedelic mushrooms that can be used for visions and for astral projection, and always do it safely, but people do use mushrooms for that. So definitely an important ingredient. We've got a cat, and of course it's a black cat. I was joking with my friend. I was on his podcast, which I'll put a link down below, and I was talking about witchcraft and witchcraft in real life compared to, the movies and stuff, because he didn't know anything about witchcraft in real life, which I found interesting because I always thought like everyone knew about things because I always knew about things, but a lot of people have zero base knowledge. So we were talking about a lot of stuff, and he was like, what do movies get right about witchcraft? And I joked that we all have a black cat. We don't all have a black cat, but quite a few of us have a black cat. I have a black cat. So, of course, there's like witches familiar and just the stereotype of the black cat. I love it. In Carson, the intellect. Ooh, look at that bloody eye. I like that the trees coming out kind of looked like those hands that we've seen throughout these cards. They're clearly trees, but they kind of look like that, and I love it. Like, that one even has, like, just, like, 4 main branches. That looks like a thumb. I love it. And then we've got smoke coming out. It kind of looks like a volcano, and there's just... I love the details in these cards. Got bees. Bees, of course, good for pollinating, for continuing to bring nature around us. Honey is really good for spells. Of course, there's honey jars, but there's also honey's good for, bringing fairies into your space. It attracts fairies. There's so many things to do with bees. We've got a noose, like we saw on Agatha Christie's card. So there's the whole thing about like the witch trials and hanging witches or women who were too independent and accused of being witches, which would fit a lot of these authors had they existed, 200 years previous or 300 years previous. So there's that, but then there's also like bringing about the end of something, the death of something, and that whole symbolism that can be used in spellwork. We've got the eye, seeing things, observing things. Of course, there's the third eye that you can open and just, taking note of things. I have quite a few oracle cards in decks that, like the self-care deck and the fairy deck, that just say, like, go out into nature and look. Just look. Be aware. And I feel like we don't do that enough. I know I don't. So this is a good reminder, as well as, opening your third eye and all that. We've got a toad, a classic. again, in movie magic, they always like talk about like putting toads in the potions. But then there's also like, she turned me into a toad because that's what witches do. The fairy tale about witch turned a prince into a frog and you have to kiss him if it's true love and he turns back into a prince. You know, there's a lot of stuff about toads in magic, both fiction and real life. The lantern. See, when I see this, I think of the hermit card with the lantern guiding the way through the darkness and everything. But of course, there's like fire, there's, well, guiding through the darkness, the guiding light, and so many things about the lantern aside from the hermit card. Pond. This is an interesting one. I know, like, ponds are important. They bring life. They're part of nature. They cleanse. They're great. I just wouldn't have thought to include it in this deck. So I love when decks make me think about that. Like, why were they included? And I love that. So it looks like a little frog pond with the lilies and the, what is it, cattails or something. It's been a while since I've been to a pond, but I love that it's included here. And once again, I'm going to look it up in the book and see what it says. Ghost, of course. First of all, this style of deck really fits this, but there's always like talking with your ancestors. That's a big part of magic, but then there's also people who see spirits among us, and people definitely incorporate spirits and ancestral work in their magic. Absolutely. I'm just starting to get into ancestor magic, but it is so intriguing and so important to a lot of people. Sandra Cisneros, the body. It's been a while since we've got an author card, but the body, so she's carrying kind of like symbolism of the womb right there. She's again got flowers on her apron and all around her. She's got these black gloves, and I wonder why the black gloves, but because it kind of symbolizes life, and you know, black is a lot of times used for death and all that. So the body just gives life and takes it away. Sylvia Plath, the Dark, very well-known author in America. She was very infamous for a lot of her writings, a lot of her dark, tortured writings. So we've got lots of veins just coming out of her torso. We've got a hand just cut off and the arms cut off, and we see it again over here. So so that's interesting because, you know, she struggled with mental illness and all that. And then we've got, I don't know, there's like an orb coming out of the bowl, and I'm intrigued by that. Foro Farroxon. I messed that up. I thought I was doing so well with the foreign names. But we've got the well. We saw the well as its standalone card, but here we go. The well, well, it's got a door on it, so maybe not a well, but we've got these flowers all around. These flowers kind of look like they're drooping. Maybe that's just the style of those flowers, but they look like they're dying. And then we've got some birds that are clearly not doing well either. Oh, so she's Rebellion. And we've got some kind of drops of blood coming down. So there's a lot going on in this card. And like these flowers are blooming. So there's a lot of death. There's a lot of life. And she's coming out of the well, and it's just, a lot of oppositions, like this is life and this is death, and then there's drops of blood coming from the trees and, nourishing it all. Boar? Oh, I'm not really sure of the associations with this, so I gotta look that up. But here we go. Book. Clearly, you need to include this in this deck, but also books are just like so important. It's how a lot of knowledge is passed on, especially in this day and age. But like people's Book of Shadows, journaling, the written word is so important. Storytelling is so important and is its own kind of magic, even if it's not written with that in mind. And just, I love books. I love books so much. Janet Frame, belonging. I like the expression on her face. I don't know why. It just is so different. But we've got little fairies and butterflies flying above and lightning bugs. Ooh. And we've got like an eel or some kind of fish. I don't know if it's an eel, probably not. And once again, she's coming up out of the dark waters, and we've got some grass behind her, and we've got two little heads on the corners. There's a lot going on here. I love it, especially since like fairies with the theme of belonging, like they don't come to everyone. They are very picky about who they come to and who they work with. So I feel like that really speaks to it too. And again, we've got flowers on her clothes. House. First of all, I keep seeing there's a meme going around that's like, girls only want one thing, and it's the practical magic house. And I just thought of that when I picked this up. But house and home is very important. Keeping your space clean, keeping it protected, and just, that's where you go to be comfortable and to cleanse all those negative energies that you might have picked up while you're out and about during the day. It's so important to people's practice to have that space and to keep it clean from negative energies and everything. Rabbit. Interesting. Of course, there's always the lucky rabbit's foot, which when I was a kid, I didn't know the whole implication about, real lucky rabbit's foot. Oops. But there's just like also fertility, also like the whole Ostara celebration and tradition and story behind that. So there's a lot about rabbits and bunnies in traditional witchcraft, for sure. We've got a wolf. I love wolves. I feel like such a connection to wolves. And of course, they travel in packs, kind of like covens, but also there's always the lone wolf. Not always, but the stereotype of the lone wolf. And I don't know, wolves are just like very intelligent. One of those species that is very, very intelligent. And they protect each other in a pack. They care for each other. Their social structure is so interesting, and I love it. Of course, we have the moon. The moon, so important to a lot of practices. The moon cycle of rebirth and death and rebirth and just life going on. It was actually just the supermoon in April yesterday, and even though Chicago kind of sucks for seeing the stars and stuff, I can usually at least see the full moon. And last night, since it was so close, I actually saw like the craters and stuff on the full moon, which I cannot see normally in Chicago. So that made me happy. I really love the moon, even though I can't really see much of the moon, like not that clear most full moons. I always take a picture of it, and then the moon is really great for like cleansing and energizing your crystals and moon water and everything. It's a very, very, very important part of magic, of the craft, for sure. Praying mantis. This is not one I thought to be included at all. So this is really interesting. Where I grew up, we had praying mantises all over the place, and they're really good for like pest control, like natural pest control, because we had a vegetable farm. So it was really good to have those because they would eat all the insects that weren't so good for the plants. And maybe that's why it's in this deck. I'm not so sure, but like plant care and everything, but I don't know. I don't know why else it would be in here, but it's such an interesting addition. Anais Nin, the subconscious. Ooh. I like that. First off, I like that the waves kind of turn into her clothing. There's this figure with a whole bunch of eyes carrying a shell, a pearl. There's another figure with a whole bunch of eyes up here. She's just like floating in the water, writing. It really does give you like this subconscious feel, like just these dark figures just like holding out something, just being there in the background. And she just seems kind of unaware and just, focusing on what she's focusing on as these figures kind of just moving slowly. I love it. We got milk. A lot of people use milk for different things. Of course, there's like the kitchen witches where it's always really important, but then there are potions that use it, and there's just like a bunch of different uses for milk in witchcraft. Spider. I love spiders. I love spiders. As a kid, I always loved spiders. We had these spiders that I would always find that had like bright green fangs. They were black with white stripes and bright green fangs. I still, to this day, don't know what kind of spider they were, but I would always catch them and hold on to them for a little bit and then release them. And I love spiders. I also love, like, especially being someone who now knits, I love their intricate webs, and it's like its own art form. And I just love spiders. I love them so much. We've got a hedgehog. Ooh, interesting. I'm not sure about like hedgehogs themselves, but like as living creatures, but I can imagine that the needles are really good for banishment spells and for, those spells that are supposed to protect you and put up those barriers. So I can definitely see a use for hedgehog needles. And again, another card I wouldn't think to include, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. Especially since, like, that's the protective shield. It can curl into a ball and protect itself completely. And of course, that's really important for witches to protect themselves. Jamaica Kincaid for history. Ooh, so we've got, it looks like a mango, kind of. We've got the snake and a crow, looks like. Clothes in the background. Some of them do look like historical clothes for sure. We've got the bloomers, and we've got like an old style dress. And again, coming up out of the ground, the way it's curved kind of looks like out of the moon or something. But an interesting card. And we've got flies flying around the mango or whatever. So I just noticed that. I'm gonna have to look up why it's history though. Flannery O'Connor. Oh, we've got an egg spilling out blood. This is humanity. So we've got a peacock for the humanity card. Interesting. And we've got a tree in the background. And it's interesting that there's a peacock. Peacocks are often thought of as vain, as just showing off all the time. I don't know. I don't know what to say about this card. It's really interesting. But again, I'm not familiar with Flannery O'Connor, so I don't have that much to say about how it relates to her. But I gotta look why there's a peacock and a broken egg. I feel like it's saying something that I'm almost grasping, but not quite. We've got a tree. So we've seen trees throughout this deck. First of all, nature, then there's the tree of life, and so many like different trees mean different things. Especially in the US, the common names for moons are taken from Native Americans' names for moons. But in the Celtic tradition, all the names for the moons are taken after trees. So like there's the willow moon and there's the elder moon. So trees are important for that. In the Celtic tradition, different trees have different properties and meanings and symbolism. So they're important for that. And, you can always make wands out of them. I had to put that in there. But then we've got this slit in here, which is interesting to include. Like it could be a little hole for a bird, for a squirrel to hide in. But it also is reminiscent of fertility, of the vulva, which again, going back to the tree of life and all of that. Mirabai, devotion. I like it a lot. There's playing an instrument. We haven't seen anyone playing an instrument at all. And then we've got blue, either hands or gloves, a traditional like Indian looking woman. I don't know why she's devotion though. So once again, gotta look it up. Maria Sabina, healing. I love this. Okay, so we've got the, once again, disembodied hands, but this time they're tied to these vines and these leaves and these hummingbirds getting nourishment from all this. And then we've also got these animals here that are kind of have vines growing from them, and we've got feet with mushrooms growing out of them. So we've got a lot of things that are used for healing, and these feet and the hands giving us these healing materials and just, nourishing. And I love this card. I love this card so much. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Freedom, most known for the yellow wallpaper, which I studied my first semester of college, which is a story about a woman finding her freedom, but then thinking she's going insane, her family thinking she's going insane, and she finds her freedom in a way that most people would not approve of. But again, like, she's known for the yellow wallpaper, so we've got yellow wallpaper, and in the yellow wallpaper she sees like flowers come to life and stuff. I think it's been a while since I've read it, but if I'm remembering it correctly, she sees these things in the wallpaper coming to life, and she herself is coming to life. She's blossoming and realizing what kind of life she wants to lead is not the life that she has, and she's looking for her freedom. So, perfect card for her. Creature's Paw. Ooh. We have a 4-fingered claw that, remember I pointed out that tree that had like 4 fingers? Kind of looks like that tree, especially with the texture looks like bark. See, like if you turn it around, it kind of looks like the tree that we saw. So creature's paw, not anything I use in my craft, but historically has been used. And Octavia Butler as the last card for the future. Octavia Butler is amazing, and you should check out her books if you haven't. She wrote a lot of science fiction. The first book I read of hers was Kindred in college. And I remember when she died. She just died, well, I was going to say recently, but it turns out it was like 15 years ago. That's kind of recently, right? She died in 2006, and I remember when she died, and it just like felt like something was gone from the literary world, because she was so important to especially the science fiction scene, where a lot of the literature are, first of all, is written by white men, but second, doesn't really include people of color because they're written by white men, but also the publishing world didn't really, accept a lot of writings written by people of color, and she paved the way for that. And she was so important. So the future makes sense for the science fiction aspect, but also for just, she being the future that we hope for, where more people of color are welcome in these spaces, and she fought for that. So I think she's perfect for this card. Okay, y'all. It's time to talk about the Literary Witches Oracle. It's been a really long time since I recorded the first part of this video. Part of that is because I have just been falling really behind on all my tarot videos. I keep buying decks and just adding up more and more and more and having other ones to make videos of. But also, unfortunately, I just don't like this deck. I tried. I have been trying. I have been putting it aside and letting it just sit and wait for the inspiration to strike, and then picking it back up and trying to work with it again. It's just not happening. I'm so sorry. I'm so disappointed, honestly. Because I really want to love this. I really wanted to love this. It is completely right up my alley. But I've tried working with just these cards, the quote unquote spell ingredient cards. I've tried working with the author cards by themselves. I've tried mixing them in. I just don't like it. I don't like the book that comes with it. The book is just the information on the writers, great, love it. It doesn't explain how to use them in the deck. They're just mini biographies. Emily Dickinson spent her whole life in Amherst, Massachusetts. Hey, that's where I went to school. Refusing conventional religion and her prominent family's exhausting social schedule, she instead cultivated a unique spiritual and social life. She wrote long letters to friends, worked in the garden, and created strikingly original poetry about God, death, pain, and love. When Dickinson died, even those closest to her were shocked to find her life's work of 1,800 poems neatly folded in a drawer. Great! I love Emily Dickinson. How do I use that? How do I use this card when I pull it? It just says Emily Dickinson, The Soul. What about the soul is in this book? I'm so sorry, y'all. I really wanted to love this deck. I think it might be the most disappointing deck I have, tarot or oracle. I wish it wasn't so. I know, way back last year, I reviewed Oracle of the Hidden Worlds, and I didn't enjoy it at first. I actually use that a little now. Not it's definitely not my most common go-to deck or anything, but I definitely have more of an understanding of how to use it than when I made that video. But this deck, I have been waiting on making this second part because I was waiting and waiting and waiting for that, like, aha moment to click in. And I just don't think it's coming. I don't think it's coming. I'm sorry. I also feel like this deck requires a lot of outside knowledge about these different things. Like, the book says almost nothing. You need to know, like, what the use of a snail is in traditional witchcraft. Like a hedgehog. Hedgehog, cute, prickly, sure. But then, like, the authors, the writers have, like, you need to know more about, like, their works than they say in these cards and everything. I think it's a very unique deck, but that doesn't make it great. I really love the art style. I really love the concept they tried to go for, but I don't love the deck, and that's it. I feel really bad whenever I say I don't like a deck, because I want to like everything, but you know, honest reviews, I don't like it. So unfortunately, Literary Witches Oracle, not a huge fan. I honestly feel like they could have just made this part of the deck and not even included these parts, like these spell ingredients cards, and put more work into saying how to use the elements of these cards, the spirits of these writers in your divination, in your oracles, and just forgotten about the other part and just should have put all the work into this one. I will say, I can see if you're actually like a writer, maybe pull a card and be like, what kind of person do I need to embody in my writing at this point? Virginia Woolf. Great. What inspiration can I get from them? But again, that needs knowing their actual work, which I know a lot of them, but I don't know a lot of them. It misses the mark. It's just not a deck that I use. And I'm really disappointed because I really wanted to. So that's the Literary Witches Oracle. If you actually do have this deck and work with it and enjoy it, let me know how you work with it and how you found how to work with it and just how you enjoy it, because I would love to love this deck. If you have any other deck recommendations for me, feel free to write a comment down below, because I have a lot of decks and I am always on the hunt for more, much to the dismay of my bank account. If you enjoyed this video, a like and a comment go a super long way to help this channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe to see more tarot and oracle unboxings and other witchy content. I post a video about once a week, and I will see you all later. Have a wonderful, magical day.